There's a moment sometimes when you step outside and the world doesn't feel quite right. Like you're standing on the edge of something you can't name yet, but you know it's coming for you. That's how it started for me. Out on the back deck, coffee in hand, my old dog Scout nose in the air when I realized the lake behind my house, the one I'd poured half my life into, wasn't where it was supposed to be. Waterline 3 feet lower, muddy scars showing where blue used to be. That was the day I understood just how fast everything you love can be drained away and how quiet the world gets while it's happening. They say water remembers. If that's true, Oak Hollow Lake remembers every version of me, quiet mornings in the rowboat with my wife before illness stole her away, afternoons fishing with my son before he moved out west, the long hours spent alone, feet dangling from the cedar dock, trying to wash the noise out of my head. This lake isn't just geography. It's the last piece of soul left after a lifetime of war and work. 15 years ago, I moved here right after shaking hands with the military and closing out my time with the Corps of Engineers. Most folks don't think of civil engineering as dangerous, but half my life was spent keeping disasters one step away, managing dams and rivers most people never hear about. When I bought this old stone house with its faded green shutters and a dock curling into the lake, I thought I'd finally come home to quiet. Back then, the HOA was as sleepy as the water, just retirees watching the grass and mailboxes. Suited me fine. The lake was community property, sure, but my yard hugged the widest part, so I built myself a bench from cedar, sealed it tight, and no one cared. Spring brought frogs and dragonflies. Summers you'd see the odd canoe. Fall the mist would roll off the lake like an old memory. In winter the water went glass, still holding its breath. I lived for that stillness until the morning Scout started growling low at the shoreline. Scout never growls unless something's wrong. I followed his eyes and my stomach dropped where the water should have touched stone. There was nothing but wet, stinking mud, tangled weeds gasping in daylight for the first time in decades. At first I tried to make sense of it like an engineer, maybe a dry spring, maybe runoff was slow. But you live with a lake long enough, you know when nature's rhythm gets broken. I pulled my old charts and records, mapped levels for years, tracked every drought and dry season, and nothing explained this. Someone was draining the lake. Later that day, I walked the south bank near the overflow and spotted it, hidden behind brush, a new steel pipe sticking out like a broken bone, angled perfectly to send water away from the basin out to some dry gully. Fresh dirt, sloppy weld, someone rushed the job. I took photos, measured the flow. Every number pointed to the same story: the lake was being bled out. The next day I marched into the HOA office with a file of evidence. Linda, the new manager, face frozen in a permanent scowl, made me wait, but I didn't leave. Finally, they let me in with the board. At the head sat Brad Whitmore, late 30s, ex-tech sales, obsessed with modernization. Security cameras, drones, digital finds, always some new system. I laid out the facts, photos, flow rates, a summary of the hydrology. There's an unauthorized pipe draining the lake. Brad just smirked, called me paranoid, said it was all part of a water optimization project. When I brought up county code and HOA rules, that wiped his smirk clean off, but instead of talking, he got hostile. Claimed they'd consulted experts, said everything was under control. I gathered my papers, left a copy on the table, and left. That night, I sat with Scout on the bench, staring at the exposed mud and the dock legs dangling in air. I'd seen rivers die before, seen what happens when people cut corners or think they know better than the land. Never thought it would happen here. The HOA newsletter came out a week later now, all digital because paper is wasteful. Between pressure washing updates and photos of Brad, I saw it. Water optimization phase 1 completed. Improved drainage, better mosquito control. My blood ran cold. I set down my coffee. Scout looked up, sensing my mood. "They aren't just draining it," I whispered. "They're gutting it." I walked the trails, saw the pollen clinging to dried mud tadpoles, stranded in shrinking puddles, the lake's future evaporating. Spotted workers in neon vests expanding the trench. Went home, dug up the old Covenant's Article 4 in black and white. Any change to shared natural resources needs an 80% homeowner vote at a public hearing. None of that had happened. I printed the proof, took it to the next HOA meeting. Brad tried to wave me off, call it routine maintenance. I shot back, excavating a shoreline isn't routine, Brad. That's a modification, and you know it. The room stirred. For once, people listened. Brad threatened me with hostile behavior. The next day, I got a certified letter, $250 fine for being disruptive. I laughed. Scout barked. They wanted a war. They picked the wrong guy. They didn't know about the boxes in my attic field commendation sediment studies from all over the world. I didn't pay the fine. Instead, I got to work, became invisible. Up before dawn, collecting samples, building my case. If they called this maintenance, I'd prove it was destruction. The retaliation came: quick contractors staking a violation sign in my yard. Non-compliant landscaping. My yard was spotless. More violations by noon, distributing unauthorized materials for telling the truth, disruptive behavior, improper perimeter edging. They wanted to bleed me dry, but I'd survived worse. I changed tactics. Talked to neighbors quietly, mailbox by mailbox. Mrs. DeMarco Jorge. Stories spilled out. Fines for fence colors, towed cars, digital sensors, finding violations. Different details, same pattern control. The lake kept dying, algae spreading, cattails turning yellow, the stench settling over everything. Joggers wore masks. The HOA blamed seasonal variation, quoting studies from Arizona of all places. Then the fish floated up, dozens, then hundreds belly up. Crews scooped them into trash bags, but you can't hide the truth. With my evidence, I went to the state. 4 hours in a government lobby before a senior investigator, Elaine Turner, heard me out. No ranting, just facts, data proof. She listened, nodded, and for the first time, I felt hope. 2 weeks later, a white SUV rolled into Oak Hollow. Elaine didn't care about hedges. She walked straight to the pipe, the dead fish, the optimization signs. Brad panicked, called an emergency meeting, blamed misinformation, pointed at me as the villain. This time I wasn't alone. Neighbors stood up, Mrs. DeMarco Jorge, a father whose kid got a rash. We want to know why you lied, why the lake is dead. Brad had nothing. Elaine just watched. Next morning, a legal notice taped to my door. Not a fine, a lawsuit. They wanted $50,000 for tortious interference. Tried to bankrupt me before the state finished their work. I looked at the paper, looked at the lake, and decided I wasn't fighting alone. Brought the Department of Environmental Protection, brought every bit of proof I'd gathered. Court wasn't dramatic, just a tired old judge. Brad's lawyer looked ready to bolt. The judge tossed their case in 5 minutes. Then the real trial began, state versus HOA. Elaine's testimony dismantled their defense invoice by invoice. The smoking gun, a bill for installing that pipe signed by Brad, dated before the water dropped. When I testified, I talked about the memories, the mornings, what community really means. You didn't just drain the water, Brad, you drained the spirit of this place. The judge's ruling thundered $85,000 penalty, year-long restoration board elections. Brad quit and left. A young guy, Elijah, took over, promised stewardship, not just tech. The lake healed slow but sure. I'll never forget the first time I saw a base cutting through the water again, Scout beside me, older but wagging the ripples, reaching every dock. These days, neighbors talk again. We argue, sure, but we do it out in the open. I kept a chunk of that steel pipe in the garage, a reminder that nothing changes if good people stay quiet. But sometimes I lie awake wondering how many other Oak Hollows are out there, how many places where nobody stands up and the water just keeps receding. So let me ask, did I do the right thing, pushing back, or did I just start a new kind of fight? Have you ever had to stand up to someone trying to take what's yours? Or are you still waiting for someone else to notice the damage? Drop your story in the comments. Is your HOA a community or a cult? Because the only way to keep control-hungry folks out is to watch the waterline together. Like, subscribe, and remember, water always remembers. And so should we.